Ron, can you hear us?
Yep, I can.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I'm calling the meeting to order, recount. And first of all, we'll take attendance. As I see everybody's here actually. So, okay, Nora Bucko. Here. Michael Goldman. Here. John Hassen. Here. John Sasso.
Present.
Mark Doxer. Here. John O'Neill. Here. Ron Assini.
Here.
So all 7 members present. Okay, first of all, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the April 10th meeting. Do I have a second?
Second. With comments.
Okay. So any additions, corrections, or deletions?
Yes.
All right.
Sorry, gotta find the spot. So sorry, this is 410?
Yes.
Okay, so I think maybe for Ron, I think when we do the votes, like approvals of meeting minutes and votes, right now it just has names listed. I think that just to make it clear, we should say like approved 5-0, and then it can have the names of the people who voted, just so it's clear what went on. It should.
Okay.
I think it's simple change. So each of those were approved 5-0. Those 3. 2 other suggestions on at the very top. Sorry, the very top where it talks about resident from Oakland Road neighborhood. I think it should just say public comment. Resident, and ideally, if we could identify who it was, would be the best. I know the gentleman was in the room. I don't remember his name. If we know, it would be great. If we don't, we don't. But just in the future, it'd be great to be able to do that. And then last on that one. Yes, it was.
Because she listed the others present.
Oh, okay. So I would just identify him there, so we know who it was that spoke. Then on page 2, then it said something about some residents weighed on the process. I think we should just say some Oakland Road neighborhood residents. If there were particular ones, great. If not weighed in on the process, how we arrived at this point in the process, and their opposition to the Oakland Road location. Again, just to make it crystal clear. And then on recalc adjournment, same thing, 5-0 vote, and then the names attached. And then they're just clean, done.
Okay, when you say 5-0, it's really 7-0 if everyone's here though, right? Is that correct?
So, well, on that particular one, there are only 5 people present. So
Okay.
they do not want to say 7-0.
Yeah, I got it. That's for the April 10th one?
April 10th. Yeah, but you're right, depending on how many people are voting, whatever
Yep.
the vote is, the count, and then you can indicate who voted that way. And that was it. Everything else was fine there.
Good.
Okay. Any other additions, corrections? None. All in favor with the comments?
Actually, you need a roll call.
Oh, yeah, because Ron's. Okay. Ron Assini.
Yes.
Okay, John Sasso.
Yes.
Mark Doxer.
Yes.
Michael.
Yes.
Goldman. Nora.
Yes.
John Hassen. Yes. John O'Neill, yes. The minutes are approved. Oh,
That's 410.
on 410,
Yep.
and yes. And we had approved a joint meeting, but that was for an earlier joint meeting at our last meeting. Because the 24th, we haven't approved those. We haven't approved those. Okay, that's what I was, all right. So I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
But I don't think that we have the minutes for that. They weren't sent out.
Yeah, they were. I think they were.
There was one that was repeated twice.
Right?
Yes,
that's why I got 2 copies.
Hold on, so we got 410 that was in.
And then 424 was the joint.
Let me see.
410 was in there twice.
Yeah.
And then what's this other one?
So we will not.
This was 4.3 that was attached, but I thought we had already, That was the prior joint meeting.
That's one view. I didn't think we did one.
So it's not
can
on
we take
the,
you know what? Take a look at the date, because I think the date might have been more of a cut and paste. Take a look at the content, because I think the content may be different.
On 410?
424 is different than 410.
Do you see one that says 424?
She could have just.
No, I have,
I think what Ron, are you suggesting that we got two copies because one actually is the minutes for the 24th, or no?
yeah, let me check. Let me see, hang on. See what Jenna sent out. Oh, she didn't send out the 424. Okay. I have those, so I can send those to Jenna. I sent it on the 24th, but I'll send it out to her again.
Okay. So obviously we'll hold on those. Also, while I think of it, Jenna said to remind me to ask anybody who's any of the public who's on the Zoom meeting to enter their name on the chat. So we'd have,
Yep.
should have a record of it. Okay. So if people would please do that, we would appreciate it. So then discuss timing, the recalc vote, and presentation to the select board.
So 4-3, did we already approve that in the
Yes.
prior meeting?
Yes, we had done that.
Okay.
It's the 24th, that's not the state. Okay. Move on.
Thank you. Yep.
Well, under this, we did get the attachment from Jenna, which I really appreciated her putting it together. So I know she had asked people to submit comments, but certainly not limited to, that's open. It's open for discussion now and for any other items relevant to the presentation select.
do we want to answer, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at it. Do we want to discuss just do a quick update on the timing? Because I know you actually mentioned it last night at the select board, so I just thought it'd be helpful.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we are now off the agenda for the May 21st meeting and on the agenda for the June 18th. And I've spoken with the Permanent Building Committee. They're planning to discuss this next week at their meeting. And then Pat Tompkins, the chair, was talking about calling a second meeting sometime targeting June 10th latest, so that there would be time for us, probably COA, to meet, to take a vote, to finish what's left of the presentation, which might just be the recommendation now with the input from PBC. And
That would be post June 10th.
post 10th and pre-18th. Yep, exactly. In the window. Related to that would be obviously figuring out the schedule for BH plus A, if there's anything else that they need to be doing. The other thing is to have a discussion about what other work might need to be done or could be done at Simon's Way in advance of kind of the final recommendation or concurrent with it, whatever. Specifically, if there's going to be anything done at Simon's Way, it may be that we need to explore intrusively a little bit more in the areas we talked about. In other words, doing some digging and analyzing what's there, if anything. Hoping that it's nothing.
In the dirt, you mean?
Yes.
Literally?
Yep. So that's going to get checked with town council in terms of what the process would be. Maybe to even see if the select board could ask that that be done, but it involves some money. And there, thinking out loud, it may make sense to take some of the funds that were allocated from ARPA to the activities for the senior community. It's about $9,000 is the proposal to do the work, to do the testing. And then we need to understand from town council what happens, what obligations there are, what does that mean? My understanding is that if you find something, you have to remediate.
Which testing company?
Sorry, which?
Which testing company was that?
BH plus A had one that they've done work with in the past.
Oh, BH.
Yeah, and then they had reviewed what Weston and Sampson had already done.
Right.
And now town engineer is looking at any past information that we might have when they did the Burbank Arena, when they did the field, anything that we might already
There are
have.
different ways to.
Yeah, and you know, I don't know what it means, but I think we need to understand what it means. But I think if anything's going to happen there needs to be a discussion of how are we going to approach it as a community.
So technically, it would be under the same contract with HHJ, is that, so it wouldn't have to go up to bid, or is that, what's the town?
So it's under 10 grand.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't think it has to go out for bid that way. It might be possible under BHA, I don't know. I think it's more where is there funding to do this? Does it make sense? And I think also it was in their scope to explore things. I don't think it's explicit. Yeah. It might be, I think this is, again, town council needs to weigh in a little bit on this, see what's what. And then I think the question would be, so certainly they had budgeted that money when their bid to us that we accepted, that we agreed upon, certainly didn't include money to do this. So there are a lot of questions.
So, couple things if I can, John. So just as it relates to the specific issue, as Mark said, the intent is to push off our presentation and recommendation until the later meeting in June. And I, for the various reasons Mark's discussed and what we're trying to accomplish, I don't necessarily, do we think there's any impact to the BH&A work if that decision gets pushed off, at least, and it may even be pushed off further beyond that, because it's really going to then still go back to the select board to make okay, we want you to then keep moving with the feasibility study, and there's all this discussion about how does that transition from potentially what might be recalc into another organization to kind of shepherd the feasibility study beyond that. So I just want to, from that perspective, I just want to make sure we understand if there's any impact to that timing.
So a couple of impacts. Sorry, I missed that. So
Okay.
right now, this group sunsets on June 30th.
Yeah.
And when we go to the select board, so the select board has options. 1, they could approve. 2, they could disapprove. 3, they could ask more questions, right? So if they had other questions, I suggested to the board last night that it might make sense to continue recalc for another month or 2 if it turns out they have questions. But that decision doesn't have to be made until they either have or don't have questions.
Right.
So that would be on the June 18th agenda also, the possibility of voting to extend, to continue some of these activities. So that's piece 1. BH&A, I think, has no problem if it's just essentially 3 weeks later, which is what it would be. However, if it continued, that might be a different story.
Yeah.
And what's the other piece? So we talked PBC. Sorry, you brought up one other issue that does have a timing.
That was the PBC question about where does that transition take place?
The transition. So creating the committee. Again, I brought to the board's attention that a sense of the board has been that would be the right thing to do. This group would no longer exist. Who takes it over? Typically, it would be the permanent building committee. They would create basically a project building committee. It would consist of all the members of the permanent building committee, and then they would bring on 1 to 2 more members who would be voting members for this project only. And so the process for that is, so number 1, they're considering stuff. Number 2, I started an application because that's the other thing that needs to take place. I think I have it sitting here. Oh, that's not it. That's the wrong project. TBC application. So I started that. Permanent Building Committee application. There's a standard form that they use that goes through it. This is a little different because usually there's already a site selected and it's just about the building. And here we don't yet have a site selected. But again, in talking with the committee, they would like to weigh in first. They'd like to weigh in before, or to review site options at this time. And that's why they'll bring it up at this meeting that's next week and then one to follow, is to kind of talk about that, see if there are things that they may comment on or ask about that would help before we're kind of finalizing things. And I think the other advantage of that is that as the select board hat, going to be asking these questions about, have you gone through that? Have you brought in experts to kind of give some more opinions on this toward the recommendation that we.
Plus, it has the other benefit that there are other things that the town might do with Simon's Way, and the same issue would come up. So this,
Right.
It'd be good to know what exactly is under that soil, and how might the town proceed.
Yeah, so I think so town council needs to weigh in. I think the select board then needs to have a discussion. And then if it's a situation where we could have it under the BHNA contract to do it, we'd have to find funds to do that, which I think would probably have to come from that which has been allocated to the senior services.
So I want to get to that in particular, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about timing and the pieces of this that are kind of still open and what decisions still have to be made in terms of how we close up what we're doing. So I think I'm clear with that. That's helpful for me. Anybody else have any open issues or questions on that?
No, the timing now is fine, clear, because it was,
It was right with Woodland.
Right. Okay.
And I think it's good. I'm pleased that the Permanent Building Committee is going to take an active look at it, before we make a recommendation, rather than the other way around, and that would throw everything. Yeah. As far as the letter that came from the historical commission, is that on the record now? I know we all got a copy of that.
It's a public document.
Okay, all right.
Absolutely.
So
it's just that people don't know who are on Zoom here. The historical commission weighed in on the Pearl Street site because it's a historic building.
Pleasant Street site.
Pleasant Street, yes. Pleasant Street, in which we're now having this meeting. That the addition that was proposed in the study would basically too large. These are the size of the historic building. And it was basically, they didn't use the word dwarf, but would be
Distracted from.
You're being nice.
yeah. So yeah, the end result is they were saying, no, this would not be a good location for an expansion.
So to be clear, they're an influencer in the process, not the decider.
No, right, but that's,
But yeah, and aside from the dwarfing, they also were very negative on the extension out the front.
Yes.
That was an important
oh, yes.
aspect of the design.
Which I think is what we expected,
Yeah.
but now it's more formalized.
So they didn't like the size, but they really didn't like the extension.
Right. So now they're talking about our children.
Right.
Okay, so we did. So one of my questions that on the assessment of the Simon's Way site for thing that I would like the town council to weigh in on is if you do that kind of measurement, do you have to do measurements of the whole site, or can you just do what we're considering the buildable part?
It's an awesome question.
That is a
I think
good
it's a good town
question.
council question. My expectation is it's just the area that you're talking about.
I'm hoping that that's the case.
Yeah, I think that's what's going on. And actually, BJNA had already expected that there would be some remediation required because I think it's 18 inches of soft packed vegetation, organic materials that wouldn't be suitable for their foundation anyway. So they already expected that that would have to come out. The question would be, how do you take it out? So depending on what they find, might be a different process. Yeah, how you get it, where you put it, right? All those. And then I'm not an expert here at all, and this is why we need some expertise. Depending on what you're doing, may have different implications. So in other words, if you have to remove stuff, that you're stirring everything up. If you're putting stuff over, you're hard surfacing some stuff. I don't know if that's the same or different.
It's definitely different.
That's my expectation again, and I have no expertise. That's why I was asking for help.
What the kind of soil that you put a parking lot on is very different than the kind of soil you put a building. So
Right.
you can put a parking lot on. We're getting to chunk.
Yeah.
It
And
will
on
be
top
flat
of
10 years from now.
Can I ask something?
Sure.
Did they do this when they built the ice rink?
that's what we're trying to find out. I don't know. You would imagine so? But we can
I
find
think
out.
the police rinks, I mean, the ice rinks are enough away that they might not.
No. So the bordering areas are, one side was a Nike site and the other side is the rifle range. So, and then the third piece is a construction area where materials may or not have
Right. I mean,
come out.
was the ice rink 1990 or
This is 30 years ago. So, yeah.
1999. So in the 30 years after the ice authority got done, Sadie might have done something.
Yes, do they answer their business? Sure, could be. I mean, I think that there's a vehicle that's been recovered, but I'm not aware of anything else going on at age.
Vehicle?
Vehicle.
Oh, there's vehicles all the time. You wouldn't believe where they are.
Yeah, and you know, look, we did get, you know, Weston and Sampson did some above ground testing, I guess, whatever, and didn't identify anything that was particularly of problematic, like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. But then they also said, however, you ought to do this next level. And that's what I think is being proposed to do. So,
You have to do it.
yeah, so this hasn't really, so it was discussed gently last night at the select board meeting. It hasn't been discussed in further detail yet.
What about the SWEC committee? Are they in the same?
Yeah, so SWEC presented last night to the select board. So that's public record also. And they indicated lots of different potential uses, one of which was having some of the land that we're talking about to be used for senior/community center solo, and a version where that's part of what goes on there, and there's all sorts of other things also. So they basically identified the potential to do lots of different things. One of them, or one or two of them, involve potentially putting the
Yeah, it looked like they presented like kind of building blocks of sections, like, okay, if we do this small thing, we can do this. We do a little bit more, we do this. If we want to expand it, we can do here. If we want to go back here, we go over here. And then if we want to do everything, this is what the whole thing looks like. So it's kind of like a menu of different choices potentially, depending on.
Are they planning on investigating this?
No,
No, that wasn't part of it.
wasn't really, I guess it's the select board's charter at this point, the town's charter to
Has anybody thought about asking Mike Devergan about some of the stuff that might have happened anywhere on any site in this town?
I'm sorry, who?
Mike Devergan,
I don't know who that is.
Mike Devergan was the head of the DPW garage, and he's just one of these guys that was very, very competent, and he knew everything that happened in town.
It'd be great to chat with him. Maybe if you can,
As far as I know, he still lives in Reading. I haven't seen
Yeah.
him in a while.
so I know that the town manager is working on this now and is exploring. So I think think it's a great suggestion to add
Peter
people that
Heckler-
know some stuff.
Peter Heckler,
Yeah, I think that if people are potentially gonna be rolling around, we gotta see what's going on and make sure it's okay, period. That's my opinion.
So it wasn't, as far as I understand, it wasn't, to your point, Mark, Sweck's charter to do that level of feasibility. They were really just trying to give kind of like idea concepts of the ways in which things could be done there. And, you know, these are the possibilities, and without necessarily going to that next level down, but at least as far as I could tell.
They didn't exclude it. They took this study and what people identified as priorities, and they kind of said,
Right.
okay. And like you said, different blocks. And the final thing was that all you could do, try to do everything, you know, but that's not like, that was the thing. But, you know, so which pieces that you decide, one of the things they need to know is the senior center.
Yeah.
Right, and to be fair to them, they were just at the building block level. They
Right,
weren't
they
saying,
didn't exclude anything.
It wasn't their, yeah, it wasn't their-
PHA has drawings of how this would fit, and they move things a little bit to make other things fit. That's not what Spec has done. So for instance, there's multi-purpose fields without dimension or
Right.
surface or anything.
I mean, I think it's, look, there's very little open space in town, and the question was, what are the visions, what are the different ideas, what are possibilities? And they included in those possibilities that the recal could fit there quite nicely. It's not like, oh, no, that can't be. It's much more that it really could.
So I think it was interesting that one of the things that was high on the list was just having this conservation. I say that not just because of
Yeah.
Simon's Way, but all the more reason then, if you just do it, people were talking about, well, if you have the senior center in Simon's Way, then maybe you can have something else on the road. And I'm thinking that doesn't seem to be using up all the space that's available isn't necessarily what people are.
Yeah, I really think, however, we need to focus on our mission. And there'll be discussions of what to do and not do with different places. We need to talk about what we think is the best location, get all the input, make sure it's coming together. And then get the select board to agree that, okay, do the schematic drawings. And then from there, then the hard part starts.
So can we go in, I wanted to
Yes.
go through and
Yes.
identify some questions and items that I think, and this conversation's been good because it's generated a few more questions in my mind. So let me start with the first, this isn't gonna be in order, but I wanna start with the one that you guys were talking about earlier, which is somewhere in here, identifying things that potentially could be done as, let's call them, mitigation activities before the final feasibility study is done. So for example, the idea about going to Simon's Way and doing some more soil sample things. Let me make this is just a suggestion I'm gonna throw out because I'm trying to stay site neutral from, at least at the moment, is that, so I like the way this was done in terms of the way it's progressed and the way it's developed and then the pros and cons. And I think to keep that sort of sense that sort of sense of balance in the presentation, not talking about recommendations, but in the presentation itself, I would advocate identifying mitigations that could be, and I'm going to call them mitigations if you allow me, mitigations that could be done on any one of the three sites. So, for example, one could say, hey, you know, if you were going to go to Pleasant Street, we would want to look at the water issue that was identified here potentially. Or if we were going to go to Oakland Road, we might want to really look at the ledge. Or we might really want to look at some other traffic related issues. But I think it would be, and the reason I think that's important is because that also raises up that kind of, what are the questions that each one of these sites still has that we haven't necessarily answered, and whether or not we could even get more answers as part of the completion of the feasibility study. And I'm not necessarily suggesting that we would want to do any or all of those. I just think it would be helpful to say, could there actually be some more things that we could do in that next piece, or that we would want the architect to do in that next piece before they get to the end of the feasibility study that could help really allay the concerns of the community about a particular site that we may have selected and then come up with.
The things that you mentioned are in here. Are you, what you're saying, John, is like safe, open, the traffic, you know, for example, and the ledge.
Right, so that,
So we're identifying that are you saying that there should be some things like we're doing the soil?
right, I would say that, okay, let's say, I'm just gonna throw an example here. So let's say, we all say, traffic on Oakland Road is the worst thing. And but we still think it's a viable site. So what would you want to do to help allay everybody's concerns, or for that matter, determine whether there's anything you could do? So you say, you know, we're going to spend X dollars on you're not going to get a full-blown traffic study at that point, but we're going to spend some money to do a better assessment of maybe what you could do to the roads, or how you could do some traffic assessments there as part of that final phase 3. If that was the site you selected, so that at the end of that thing, you would say, okay, and now we did a bit more work on it, and here's how we think we could mitigate this issue. Same thing with Simon's Way. We're saying we want to do some soil samples here because we're really concerned about what we might find. And so now we want to have some information. So what I'm suggesting isn't that we haven't already identified the downfalls. What I'm suggesting is we identify, if we can, maybe we can't, we identify what mitigation actions would we, depending on the site that gets selected, what mitigation actions could we propose to do during that phase 3 that would help answer some of those open questions that wouldn't necessarily normally be addressed in that phase 3.
I'm still confused. Timing wise. When you say phase 3.
So phase 1 and phase 2 of feasibility is what we've been doing up until now. At the end of phase 2, we're presenting to the select board a recommendation for a site location.
Okay.
That site location will, making the big assumption here, assuming the select board says, yes, go forward, and they're going to tell BH&A, take this site and do detailed level plans and drawings on it. And that's what they're going to go off and do. They're not going to do much more than that, well, maybe, but that's what they're going to do to then give us a much more definitive plan of what would look like, and maybe even hone in a little bit more on the cost side. What you guys were talking about just now about Simon's Way, about doing a soil sample study, is one of the mitigations that we would recommend as well that they do, in addition to that work they're doing in phase 3, detailed drawings and whatnot. And what I'm suggesting is that if we believe that there are other similar type of mitigation studies that we would want to do on any one of those 3 sites during what could potentially be a phase 3, we should also present them in this presentation. It may not be the site that we recommend, doesn't matter. We should still say, hey, if you have this issue concern, maybe there is a way to do some work in phase 3 to address it, or maybe there isn't. But just to give folks some context to everything that we're talking about here, because I like to compare them on a level playing field too. So I don't know if you're still confused, but yes, please go ahead, help.
I think H&A did some of this in terms of saying, hey, before you pursue this, these are the kinds of things that we haven't done, but you're going to want to think about. So they may be a good source. Yeah. So with us, the H&A, and maybe this is another ask on the permanent building committee, as part of when they're coming back and they're reviewing the sites and walking the sites and yada yada, they could come back and say,
yes,
this is the kind of thing you would want to do.
I would actually I think I've told you this a couple times. I'm hoping they come back and tell us, either on a particular site or just in general, during this next phase 3, you should at least do this, or you should do this in addition. And in my mind, that's really what I'm talking about, is being able to articulate that during our recommendation, so that, to Mark's point, If that means we need to reallocate some funding somewhere to cover some additional efforts, we should know about that and figure out how to do that to support that project at that point.
Where I still need a little more specificity is that, is this before we decide on a site? Or is that when we decide on a site, we've already said that these are the things that we need?
So I'm
That's what-
right. So I'm recommending, and you guys can disagree, my recommendation is to have a fair assessment of all the sites. I would want to at least at some level identify what those things would be. It may be that we only then give more details on the recommended site, but we can decide that.
This is Ron. I have a question. So John, I'm a little confused because I thought a lot of those things were flushed out in our assessment already with comments and everything else. So
So-
I'm not sure how much more we could add to that besides all of the things that all the comments that everyone already added into those.
So I think John's, and the timing is sort of the critical aspect.
Yeah.
So for example, Simon's Way, we're concerned about the contamination, possible contamination, and what we might have to do to accomplish that. Did we include that in all our evaluation criteria?
I did.
Yeah, but whether, how carefully we did that, I don't know.
Not quantitative.
Did I consider, my concerns about the ledge at Oakland Road? Yes, I did. Did I potentially overweight that concern and underweight contamination? I think that's what John is sort of talking about, is sort of how do you assess some of these things? Traffic at Oakland Road, was that overweighted or underweighted? Do we have any, is there in the next month, can we figure out this stuff? So you can do soil
What
sampling to get contamination understanding in a month. That's pretty clearly done. I don't think you can do a full-blown traffic study, but you can look at the site and
Break, I'm sorry. Okay, let me clear this up.
think,
I'm not suggesting that we do any of this in the next month. What I'm suggesting is for the presentation to the select board, when we present the 3 sites and the pros and the cons, which has already been laid out relatively nicely here, we are also, we've already, in my mind, unless I'm hearing differently, we've already, in my mind, identified an activity on top of what would happen normally during phase 3. We've already identified an activity that if the Simmons Way site were to be selected, we would suggest that they do that soil sample work during that phase 3 piece as well. Okay.
Just because, aren't we really going forward with the soil sample, recommending it? Because that's already the direction. Simon's Way is already the leading.
Well, so I will, okay, so whether I believe that or not is irrelevant in some respects. We have to, I believe, my perspective is we have to at least provide some common comparative information to the select board. No. I'm sorry. I'm not, it's tough to articulate here. I'm not asking us to collect that soil sample information prior to meeting with the select board. What I'm suggesting is that when in this presentation, when we present, so we have a slide on pros, we have a slide on cons, and then we have a slide, I'm just going to use the word mitigations. Is during phase 3, if you were to select this center, this site, or this site, here are the things that we think you should do, physically do, and here's the cost estimate that we think that they would be. So that you, and it may be that each of those sites have a different, that will have a different list of things that, and it's going to be a short list. It's going to be maybe one or two things I would expect in each of them. But I think I just think it's relative to say to the select board, we've considered, even though we're going to make a recommendation, so we're going to make a recommendation at the end of that. We're going to say, given everything we've just showed you, pros, cons, and work that we think could be done to further mitigate and understand each of these sites, this is this, and that, by the way, that's one of our criteria. If there's 5 things on that list that we think we need to go in and mitigate, that's a much more risky decision than just one, to some extent. And so I just think we need to be clear, and I want to present the full picture. And I think that's something that we should say, is that if you were to pick site A, site B, site C, here are the things that you would want to do on top of that. And then it still means, okay, we've showed you all this stuff. Now we're recommending this site. And so don't forget, if you do select this site, there is at least a couple things, maybe 1, maybe 2 things that we think you should fund on top of what was already planned in the phase 3 feasibility study to go do. And I just think that way, because what happens if we just say, well, we're only going to show that recommendation for the one thing we want to do at Simmons Way, and the select board decides, you know, it doesn't matter, we want to go to Pleasant Street. Okay, well, maybe there are a couple things that if they were going to go to Pleasant Street, we would actually want them to do. So I just want to be complete. I'm sorry. I guess that's the point. I would want to be complete and comprehensive in the information we present so that they can make a good decision.
I'm saying we're not going to be equally comprehensive because we're going to have the soil sample before we make a recommendation. That seems to be the timing issue. We're not going to have it.
We might.
We're not
Yeah,
going
so
to.
no decision, no discussion has actually taken place on that yet.
So we
don't know the timing, we don't have a source of funds, we don't know what else we need to do.
I don't,
Don't know
I'm
anything.
sorry, maybe I was never thinking that that was a prior to decision activity. Did I miss?
I didn't until we took you gave the timeline, including the permanent building committee. And in that, I certainly got the strong, suggestion at least that the soil sample was going to be done.
So the only thing that's moving forward right now, I believe, is to consult with town council about what are the requirements, how might all this work, and what would be involved. There is an estimate that was obtained in terms of what it would cost to do this next level work based on what Weston and Sampson had proposed, saying, well, if you're going to do this, you should do this next. That's all that's happened so far. The timing.
John, are we taking public?
He's been up for about 10 minutes.
Well, I think we need to have our discussion first.
Maybe he's got some input. Maybe he's gonna tell us something that's gonna help us.
What's the sense of it?
As much as I want to take input, I really want to get through the rest of this.
Okay.
But I do think that I don't think we have an answer, John, I guess is the question on that. And so even if the answer was, I guess I would say, even if the answer was, we're going to get the information before that meeting, I still think it's okay to identify other things that we might want to do at these other sites in the event the select board makes a different decision than our recommendation.
I would say with this, and there's pros and cons.
Yes.
We can say within that, these are the ones that we think absolutely, these are the high priority. These are the 2 things. Mitigation is probably not the right word.
Again, mitigations is not the right word. Risk reduction. I mean, I don't know. It's just it's activities that one would want to do to have more information so that when it comes to the end of the phase 3 feasibility study, we not only have got all the things that we were expecting, but we've also added some additional pieces of information that the community has said we're concerned about, and we want to understand how those things may impact this particular site. I guess that's the way I consider it.
So, I just have a question. John, isn't that something, or maybe I'm missing it, but isn't that something that BH&A would provide? Because they're the experts in this. We could be missing something completely that they have more expertise at.
It's certainly possible, but again, maybe I'm reading the phase 3 work differently. I mean, the phase 3 work is design and schematics, right? They were not, so I don't believe, so let's say we went to Simmons, let's say Simmons Way was the right place to go. What is BHNA gonna do? They're gonna tweak their site plan, and they're gonna do designs and schematics. Are they gonna go out and do soil samples at this point?
No, but I think, can I bring this together for a second? We can talk about some things that we think will make sense, but I think BHNA should be able to come in and say, hey, if you were gonna go to this site, these are some other things you're gonna need to do. So
Yes.
they're, in addition
Yes.
to
Right.
doing this, they're gonna say, okay, here, you need to do A, B, and Q, right? I think the permanent building committee might also be able to say, hey, we
should do
kind of
something
want
else.
this site, guess what? I think you better be doing this.
Yep.
That would be great. I think that pulling all that together is great. I think the slight concern I have is that we gotta decide where the horse is and where the cart is on this. I want to make sure the cart doesn't go running ahead of the horse. 'Cause that could-
Yeah, I know, there is a concern that we get so far into the weeds on that we miss
Yeah.
I get that. All right, I'm not asking, I'm sorry to have dragged us down in this one, but I do think it's important to have other pieces of information available. And I guess my only concern is that unless we pushed for it or identified it, I think the phase 3 work that BHNA was going to do was a pretty kind of set thing of here's what we're going to present you so that you can do that it may not necessarily go that next level on some of these other things, because that's really what would get done in the more definitive development of the site in terms of the actual contract of more final design and construction. So
Mark, is this an ask that we can have of BHNA as part of the end of phase 2, potentially?
So-
Yeah,
John's asking?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely, yes.
And see if the permanent building committee, at least at a high level, can, in their
Yeah.
walking of sites and thinking of things, can say, hey, for this thing, you need to do this kind of thing. And I think the third piece is kind of, us and the community and the select board, when they talk about it also.
Yeah.
If something's gonna happen at Simon's Way, we are gonna have to investigate. It's not really a choice.
I think it was about 16 times in the last.
Yeah, no, but I think what we're talking about is kind of coming together. How do we think about what are those pieces for each of the 3 options? How do we get a better handle on what those might be and kind of add that to our review of the pros and cons? And it might even be not a pro or a con, just you're gonna have to.
May I ask, is there anything that's not already listed? Not that we don't highlight it or whatever, I'm saying, but is there anything that's not listed that we think would be one of those factors that's important?
Well, so for example, let's take Pleasant Street Center. It doesn't say anything about water. I'm on page 7, the bottom slide. Doesn't say anything about water, about.
BHNA did though, I asked that question, or the cisterns?
Yeah.
They said that is in there, how that
So
would
so
be
they could
handled.
talk about that and or say, okay, we included X for that, or we didn't include X, but it's something you're gonna have to do.
My understanding after I asked the question is that they included that in the cost estimate.
Okay, so they may have, I don't know the answer.
No, that's
Just
what they,
on this-
no, that's what they said.
There's things that are on this list that are in the.
Yeah, I was trying to.
So to your point, Sean, we could ask them, okay, we know water's a potential issue here. We know you incorporated some work estimate in the plan to address whether it's a different draining system, maybe it's a retaining, whatever it is that they think they need to do. Do they feel that they know enough information for that to be an adequate assessment? Or is there something that they say, well, we just kind of did a back of the envelope calculation, but if you really wanted to do it, you might have to do X and Y to figure out what the true impact would be and, whether that system's even feasible to put on this property, for example. So we can, but I think to your point, we can ask them that question, on any of these points potentially.
Right, but so I'm just saying, is there anything,
I haven't gone through and looked at it in any
Oh,
greater
okay.
detail at this point, so I am talking about it a little bit philosophically.
okay, so that's, maybe that's what the confusion is, because in her thing, she specifically
There may,
links
there
the
may be,
sites,
there may be
sites
something,
and the traffic,
right,
for example.
there may be something, there may be a site where we say, you know what? We know everything we think we need to know about this site, and there isn't anything more we need to do until we're ready to build.
No, I think on both, and I'm not saying, I think on both, all I'm saying is on Oakland Road, in Simon's Way, they have identified things, and we have put it here as a thought, that we need more information on. So all I'm saying now, are there other things that we know now that we need more information on?
I think off the top of our heads, we can't, but I think we have enough information that we can make some intelligent question to BHA and to ourselves to say, okay, is there something else that we've missed or that we think we need to add to this list?
And maybe what we can also do is ask, again, BHNA and the PBC for whatever is listed, those questions, when ideally would those get addressed? I mean, I know the answer is instantly is the best, but in a project, when typically would that happen, right? Is it kind of in any project, once you have a site, you're gonna have some things that come up, and here's when you deal with those. Versus somebody saying, actually, hang on a second, boom, you gotta do this. Or,
So are we saying we can't accomplish that this evening? Because
yes,
I thought we had gotten this and we asked for input, and this was the end result of a lot of our input already, as well as input that we had gotten from the community. And so,
let me, there's a couple, so that's just, so I got a couple more comments.
okay,
So that's one thing. The other thing that's not in here, and we can decide whether we want to include this or not, is the work that we've done outside of the feasibility study, which is the site reviews, which we really actually haven't done very much looking at all, to be honest with you. I know that Jenna and others have gone to a few local sites and have filled out, or at least attempted to pull that questionnaire information in, but I know that obviously this whole feasibility thing has taken up, the majority of our mind share, but I would hate to see us lose that. And if there is anything in there that we should pull or at least add into our repertoire of information, that would be helpful. And then the other piece of that kind of flows into even though it was only, I would say, a small piece of work, is the initial work that we did on transportation, finance, and programmatics. There's not a lot there. I'm not. So, well, I'm asking the group whether there's any of that information is worth presenting, even at a very high level. I don't necessarily. I don't disagree that I would hate to lose the site review stuff, but then again, I haven't looked at it, so it's tough for me to even assess there.
And the reason why I say that is not to belittle it, but I think it's all important information. And at least I know I try to incorporate that information when I was, filling out
Yes.
the survey.
Yeah.
So certainly was important, and so should be noted. She did note about the visits we had done at the beginning of our whole thing. That's noted, in here. But see, now we're focusing. I don't want to lose focus vis-a-vis the presentation to the select board, which is that they're looking for a site recommendation. That's the final, because we've already made the case for now in our presentation.
So I don't.
Of what the ingredients should be for a senior center. In other words, we said, we know that it should be a social area, the kitchen is an important thing. We highlighted, that size, flexibility as far as how to utilize space. So that's there. So I'm just.
so I can make a comment. So I think you're almost saying, we're kind of there.
Yes,
And I would take issue with it.
okay.
This is a good accumulation of a bunch of stuff. I've made a bunch of comments. I think there's some missing pieces. I think that there's too much detail on a number of things here and no detail on others. So is this a great start to go and tweak?
Let's doing
Yes.
what though?
To get to the
I
reason.
never agreed with your vision of what we should be doing, you know, but that's,
Fair.
okay, all right.
But so, conceivably, we could come in with one slide. Board, we did our work, here's what you should do.
But no, but that's not what's being
That's
done.
not.
Okay, so now we pull back and we say, what is it that's gonna support what we did, describe how we came to the conclusion that we came to? We did a bunch of work that, some of which is highlighted here, some of which is not. Does it have implications on the decision? I think so. I think so. I think as we talk about the need for size of the facility, and
Right,
some of the
right.
things to be
Okay.
included.
Done that, okay.
So we mentioned it, but no, we haven't supported it. This is great. This is what I'm doing with my students right now. So what? One piece is to say, here is the analysis. You need the so what. Okay, great. You did the analysis. Cool. So what? This is important because, and this is leading us to our conclusion. This is why we're recommending this. We haven't done that yet. Jen did a great job pulling this together. Chris, if you're involved too, awesome. It's raw. It isn't ready. I would not be, I would, sitting on the board would not be, I'd be like, holy cow, get to it, would you?
But how, we're not gonna do this at a meeting. As a group of us, of the whole.
Yeah,
There's no
no, no.
way that's gonna be achieved.
Agreed.
I agree.
So,
I would just like to echo what Mark is saying. There's things in here, particularly about the programmatic stuff, the justification for why do we need 23,000 square feet building, okay? And we don't really make a strong case for that in here at all. And we do make a strong case for, these are the 3 sites, and we've evaluated the 3 sites, and we're putting somebody, 23,000 square feet. But
So I do want to, I hate to use this word, defend Jenna and Chris, because we did actually ask them, hey, would you mind putting together a draft? And at least what we'd like to do is understand for these sites, we'd like to understand which ones they describe them, what they are, give us the pros and cons. So we asked for this, and I think this is a nice compilation of that information, whether it's complete or whether it's the message, the overall message. I agree with Mark. There are some other pieces that we're missing. And so the 2 things that I would comment on, one is I do agree with Mark there. We do still have something missing in here to kind of give the answer to, well, why is it not just the site, but why is it that we're still, I mean, there's some background and upfront here that talk about the key priorities and things like that. And I think that's why I asked about the existing data. It'd be nice to say, oh, by the way, we've refreshed this and things still haven't changed. In fact, what we find is X, Y, and Z, and we're getting further and further behind in terms of delivering our services to our residents. The other piece that, what's my train of thought here? So the other piece in presenting this is that I've kind of been the one on this bandwagon from the beginning, which is it isn't just about building a center. It's about all the other pieces that are necessary, how we're going to fund it, how we're going to get people to it, how we're going to integrate in potentially other uses, how we're going to have the programmatic pieces of it. And I know we talked a fair amount about that in our last presentation to the select board, but I do think it's important that we remind them and the community that, it isn't just about picking a site and building a building. It's about all the other things that the community is going to commit to as a result of making this decision. And I do think the onus is on us. I do think that was part of our charter, is to share that story and make sure people understand that we've been doing more work on it. And we do see that there are still some holes in what we think we're going to be able to do. And we still need to figure out how we're going to do X, Y, and Z. But we feel, to your point, Michael, that we've identified the right size of the building, we've identified the right programmatics, so I think that message, that story still has to be spun out of this, is what I would say. And John, yes, I was not thinking we were gonna sit here tonight and go side by side and do the detailed level. We still need to do that. But I think it's very important that we as a group have this conversation and agree, is this the right thing? Because then we can go off and say, okay, how do we massage this? How do we do that? So that, I guess those are my 2 points.
If I could just add to that, there's a discussion here of United Front with COA, but it's a comment in brackets in a different color. It's not ready yet. I've got to work it through a little bit more, right? It literally goes through and it's a slide that says, this should be a United Front slide, yada, 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 I forget which one it is. But yeah, here are the recommendations. There's some things that you folks highlighted beautifully, saying, hey, folks, how do we want to deal with this? What do we want to add to it? What's missing still? So I think we do need to talk about how to take it to the next step. Maybe getting input from everybody on pieces now, saying, I think this is, something that's not quite right. Maybe even saying, I'd like to take a stab at the next version of that page or those pages.
My recommendation to you, John, is for that, we should, I'm a big outline person, obviously, but I like the idea of identifying areas and things that we think we either are missing or we want to massage, and asking people to kind of put pieces together and then bring it back together to the group. I think that's how I would suggest doing. Now, does that buzz mean it gets a little bit disjointed? I'm not going to kid you there, but I think it's really tough because this is a big story. This is not a small thing. There's a lot to go through. And to Mark's point, there may be areas where we want to cut back on some of the verbiage, but I don't want to lose the message. So I guess that's the perspective. So Ron, do you know, I think I asked this question to you the last time. Has the center review data been put together in any way, or do we have the forms, or is it, because I know you had put something together on.
Yeah, so no one really submitted anything through that form that I put in, so.
Try.
Yeah,
Do we have the forms?
there may be some other notes that people have from those site visits.
You know, if we have the site.
We have some forms, but not a whole lot.
How many did we do? Like, I think we did like a half, like a half dozen.
I think it's what the bigger impact is when we did in our first year, when we visited.
No, so
That's really.
what I was gonna offer is if people can get me the forms for what was done, then what I was going to do is look at that information and use it to validate the work that we did before, that yes, this message is still correct or whatever the issues might be. And that's that literally should be a one, not even a one slide to some extent, but just to say, hey, we went out to another 6 or 7 sites. These are the questions we asked them, and the feedback we got was very consistent with what we saw. I don't know if this, but it was very consistent. And these are here are the things that we still see as the big deficits that we're not providing, and here's how other communities have continued to invest and enhance their services.
I wish we had the ability, but there isn't any data, right? Even the state, statewide association of senior centers didn't have the information when I asked. I would have liked to have been able to pull out, just like the finance committee can do, 24, or how many comparative communities size-wise is ready. Senior centers, what's the size? What's the budgets? Those kind of, we got more of that information when we went out and did our visit the first time. You're not going to find much of that because we were asking different questions.
They were. No,
right. And when we would want to get more information as far as specifics on budgets, as far as like transportation and those kind of things. And that's where
Well, we did ask that. We did,
Yeah, we did ask
ask those questions. So
Yes.
I would still like to see whatever information we have,
Sure.
because I do think it's still worthwhile to present it and in a way
As I
that.
say, I agree that even though, because of questions and comments you see sometimes on social media, some people certainly don't even understand size-wise. Like somebody I saw reference, well, Wilmington, they don't, well, in fact, Wilmington's right, I was one of the ones that, I visited Wilmington. And they have twice as, double the number of square footage, and that was insufficient, so that's why they're building a new senior center. But people don't know that. And that's, so I agree, that's part of the case we have to make, we've said it, but we gotta put it in the final package, because a lot of people, this will be the first time they're gonna be paying attention.
I don't think this slide wasn't meant to be the final,
No,
because, I'm looking through it again after hearing this conversation, like, the pros and cons are good, but, it's like the quantitative 12-step rating system, the results of those aren't even in here. And like, that may be a good thing to have in there to kind of, I don't know, I'm just saying, like, wasn't supposed to be the final.
No, and we understood that.
Yeah.
Well, at least I speak for the rest of them. I certainly understood that.
I'm just making sure because I'm
Yeah.
listening to the conversation here and it seems to.
Yeah, no, I think we're all just kind of making sure. But what if we did this? To the extent that we do have some additional, more detailed data, great, let's bring that forth. But at minimum, I would imagine that we got, or could create summaries, quick summary of the visit, the second visit, or if it was a new site, and use that as to kind of answer some of the questions about, why did we go to that site? There was a reason why those 6 sites were selected. Okay, what happened? What did we learn? We did talk to people about all these various things. Do we have their budgets and this and that? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe great, bring it in. If we don't, fine. What was going on? What did we hear?
That's what we learned from that.
Exactly.
From that trip, from that visit.
Yep, and then use that as raw
Influence.
input, right? And then we can talk about, okay, what's the best way to present what we learned? I think that's spot on.
I think that would be a really valuable thing to continue to stress, because people continue to ask questions. What's going on? Why do we have to do this here? What's going on other sites? What's their budget? How do we compare? I mean, we may not have every little piece of answer, but I think we want to convey that we have actually attempted to go out there and gather that sort of information, and the information we're getting back leads us in this direction.
And go further. I guess we should realize that the next step, when it moves to a building committee, they're not going to be gathering this kind of data. That's not their job. That's not their charter. Right? So to the extent that we know that we're going to need more of this stuff, we should take advantage of all that we've already done. And then there may still be some needs. And we have to coordinate, staff and volunteers to figure out how we're going to get other stuff to make the case for what's going on here. So to the extent we have it, that's awesome. To the extent we don't, we're going to need to get more.
So if people have those summaries, forms, whatever they have, hand scribbled notes on paper, get them to me, please. And I will be happy to work on collating them, summarizing them, and using them to try to emphasize what we've done and how that reflects the other pieces. Because I think that's an important piece that I'd like to make sure we continue. Because I know people asked, how many sites did you visit? What did you hear? I think, it's not just a one and done. Things evolve. And
I would bet that most people in this community don't know that there is a nonprofit either already formed or just about done, hoping it's done.
It is formed.
It's formed. 460 plus. It exists. As we talk about financing options for different things, this group has now formed. We haven't told the community that it's been formed.
We're only $500 in debt already.
There's even better reasons to get more out of it.
So John Sasso, I think suggestions may go, funnel to Jenna, and then Jenna will send you those. I think that's
that's fine. Don't send them to me, send them to Jenna.
But also, like what we're learning from the COA open houses that we're having here, you know, when people come in, people don't know the size of the center until they come into this building. And I've been getting a lot of questions. They're like, "Oh, this is small," but they've never been here before, you know. And that information is, you know, you can watch a video, but it doesn't do coming here in physical space. It doesn't do it justice.
Need to make the case, folks, that this, what this is. This also, truthfully, is the closeout of this group. Right? So all the things we were asked to do, site selection is part of it, but all the different pieces that kind of led to that selection recommendation.
I think that this, I'll use your word, Mark, the story needs to be told that supports this. And that's, I do think it is a reflection on kind of the work that we've done all the way through. And it does lead, I still think it leads to the recommendation. I just think it gives it a bit more credence.
So how do we get there? We're not gonna be doing any more visits.
No.
So it's, what we have is what we have.
Yeah.
So, so how do we make the story? How do we put it all together?
Well, I volunteered to do one piece of that, which is take whatever information.
Right, but okay.
That's one piece, and then
The forms though that people completed in the last visits.
There were very few forms. Maybe half a dozen.
Right, that's.
Right.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Whatever we have. If someone didn't write one and they just wrote some notes on an email, I'd take that. Whatever you got.
I would suggest, and I'd be willing to volunteer, maybe with one other person, to try to build a bit of the story, kind of the flow of the story. And then we can talk about adding flesh to the skeleton after that.
And I should say, you know, on that, there's only half a dozen because most of the senior centers would not cooperate.
Yeah.
They would, just even to try to get them to respond calls and, you know, say that we can come see you. And here's some of the information. People were not willing to fill out that information.
I do have, I did a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago, I looked at surrounding towns and comparative towns, and I have my notes somewhere from it, comparing, kind of like their budget, how many staff and the size of the senior center plus their population town. I don't know if that'd be helpful. I can dig that back up and
Any
give
recent,
it over to you to kind of
any recent data we
compare.
any recent, yep.
You'll have to give me probably by the end of next week, I can have it to you.
And one of the things you could do, because I was asked, I think, first time, we had taken a look at this, was like on a per capita basis, budget per capita number of elders in a community, to the extent that you get, you know, a budget, a full budget vis-a-vis. And remember, because the discussion was the problem here with the Reading budget is it's a elder human services budget. The actual.
But even when you did that, even taking.
Oh, even with that.
Budget, you know, like worse, you know, they take that as your conservative assessment and you're still, you know, you don't compare very favorably, so.
And I think there was only one place. Well, you know, of like a couple of dozen that was any.
And we only could do that assessment for like, I think about a half a dozen, because that's all we had the details on anyhow, if I remember correctly. But.
So this comes to recommendation based on learnings. We need to figure out how to tell the story about the learnings, all those pieces. The culmination is, here was our charter, we gathered information, and here are some recommendations that come from it in terms of how to deal with these things. Here is a site recommendation, and it is in unison with the Council on Aging, and it has been touched by the Permanent Building Committee in some way, shape, or form, so that it wasn't kind of dropped on their, it was dropped on their lap, it wasn't dropped on their lap after the selection was made. It was asked for their input through the process, just to make sure that if there are pieces that they suggest, we can talk about what they are.
What types of things do they
are they interested in?
So they are, so you've got architects, structural engineers, people who work for or run construction companies, some of whom build public buildings. So hopefully, they have some familiarity, they have plenty of familiarity with projects, and they take them forward, they lead them. They're doing this for the school project. So they're already formed, and that group is driving ahead, working with the architect. And then there, at some point, will be a discussion of an owner's project manager, but not quite right, but not too far down the road either. The difference that we have, I think, going with this building is that the select board, through the use of ARPA funds, allocated monies to move this ahead to the point of schematic drawings to be evaluated by a meeting in the town in terms of, let's do this or not. What the process with the school is different because they need to go to town meeting to get the money for the feasibility study. And they have the benefit of the school building program that the state runs that's going to be reimbursing a substantial amount of the cost. And as a result of that, they already have kind of all the stage gates laid out. You have to do this, get approval. You have to do this, you get approval. You do this, you get approval. We're doing it based on experience with municipal buildings, right? And so you've got the permanent building committee with some of that expertise. You've got town staff with some of that expertise. And then hopefully the rest of us, helping and figuring out where we can drive it forward.
I think part of the story, focus on the story, what we have to include, I've always felt, is that the community center aspect, as well as the senior center. And certainly the senior center, that's the priority. But I think for purposes of making the case to both the select board, but certainly a town meeting, and then to the community, if we get, hopefully if we get to that point where we're going to have a vote, you have to say what the benefit is for the larger community, over and above, which I think this could be a tremendous benefit. And because if you're talking about size in the gym, it's important for elders, but it really has a significant benefit as well, non-elders. I think too, we're not just talking about, I hear, once again, when you read things in the paper or social media, people talk about kids and elders. And we just got that comment from someone, which, was good. I agree, there's things that elders can do, working with, children, that kind of exposure. But there's a need for people in their 40s and 50s, and, for activities. And there is a need for a real community center. And right now, here we are, we're meeting in the senior center. And this is probably could be like the 20th time I've been at a meeting at the senior center, none for purposes of the council. Well, I wasn't the council agent, but that goes back in the years. But in recent years, it's all been around community type of activities. And so I think there has to be, a part of the story.
So the way we were formed was based on using what some other communities' best practices have been doing, which is to create a center for active living.
Yes.
And that's more than a senior center, and it doesn't have the stigma of the words senior center. But it is very much designed to take care of this age 60 plus, those needs.
Yes.
First and foremost.
That's
right. And we're talking about an opportunity to do even more than that. I think to the extent that we dilute that by saying, hey, it's a community center and we'll take care of the 60 plus while we're doing it, runs a risk.
Right, but I'm saying, but part of the story, go to the size. If you want to make a case for 23,000 square foot, I mean, this is going to be public. I'll say that I could say 16 to 18,000 for a senior center. That's probably like right there. additional, that's, you know, I can only make the case for the additional really being needed if I'm talking about the going to be broader uses.
So again, I think on the broader uses category, I think that is part of the story. Maintaining the focus on kind of the core here, right? It's 60 plus and then, as opposed to community, community first. I think even in the surveys that we did, arguments about the wording of the surveys, whatever the arguments are, the notion there was that it'd be great to have facilities that the broader community could also use. I don't want to run afoul. I want us to stay together with the council on addressing the needs and more to the broader community, not run the risk of using words that make it harder to get to unity. We need to be unified. And then we need to unify the whole community.
I guess I'm coming from a lifetime professional career in aging where ageism was rampant. And I see that in this community. I see, and it didn't make any difference which party was in power. They all were the same as far as age. And just recently, the current administration, they made some cuts. One of the things they cut was, meals for elders. I mean, I was like, things haven't changed. And so I'm mindful of the killers. And we certainly have made the case that it's not either or, it's both things, and I'm not stepping back from that, but I'm sure in a number of people's minds, when they talk about monies, what I always heard, and I heard from, including some of the state reps and state senators, many of them are still there, that, well, if you get limited dollars, better investment is in children, in youth, not old. And so I guess that's why, I feel very strongly that we need a senior center, a good senior center. But I want to make sure that, I'm not just saying, oh, well, the hell with what people's prejudices are. We're just going to, this is going to be the sole focus. I just want to give some people a little hook to be able to hang on to as well.
It would seem to me too that Elder and Human Services is going to be in that building, which of course it would be. It wouldn't be a bad idea to remind the community that Elder and Human Services means you could be taking care of 20-year-olds for certain.
And yeah, it takes care of it.
John, I don't think we're disagreeing at all. I think we all agree that, we as a group, concluded that obviously one of our priority options was a 60 plus, to meet the needs of the 60 plus communities. But that doesn't make it mutually exclusive with them being available for the community and for uses. I think it is part of that story. And I'll go back to Mark's comment. I don't know exactly how that is going to kind of weave itself together, but that is the piece that we have to work on. I think that's the piece that we are missing from this, is that I was just thinking again about if all we did was present that one slide, here's our recommendation, I think we failed because that's not what this is about. This is about more than just presenting the recommendation. It's also about, even when we presented the last recalc report, we had 4 or 5 different things in there that we thought were important to pursue. And some of them were well beyond what we as a group could influence, but it was still important for us to articulate that to the community. I do think that there's some of that we should include as we put it in here, that the vision of this Reading Center for Active Living and how it transcends just services for seniors, which is great, which is a priority, but it does open up opportunities for other things. But I don't necessarily want to make that the priority focus, but I think it's important to include it. And
that's all I was.
And I think that's, no, I agree with you. And I understand Mark's sense sensitivity to the issue, because we do want this really to still focus and address the concerns that the community has had about servicing the senior needs. We definitely, there isn't there's never been any question in my mind that that's been a priority for us, but it's not mutually exclusive with providing kind of a broader option for the community. So how we tell that story is the piece that's the challenge of this presentation.
How are we gonna go about?
So, well, Mark volunteered to take a first stab at it, with some help.
Yeah.
Um,
A good two-person activity to make sure that it has multiple perspectives, not just. But I would be happy to be one of them.
I would want you to be one. I think you have the best vision.
If that, so are you volunteering to be number two, or was it?
Sure.
What I'll do is I'm gonna do little pieces of information to kind of feed into that, so that you guys can take
That would
things
be
into
very
you, so that.
Yeah.
That's, at least initially, that's my vision. I already told Mark this, I won't be here for the meeting on the 18th of June, so, fortunately, but.
Yeah, no, it's a shame. I don't think we can be ready earlier.
No,
We
no,
can't
no,
change
I'm,
the PDC.
no, I
See if we
mean,
can be a drop
we
later.
do things the way it is, we'll get everything together, I'll do what I can to support the presentation, the materials. We might, the other thing I was thinking, and and this thought just popped into my head, and I'm not suggesting that we spend a lot of time on it, but after the presentation's done, we might want to take it and do a little write-up, do like a kind of paragraph summary write-up to go along with it, that could serve as like a little communication on it. And so that's something that I'm thinking that
I
could
think it's
be,
great.
yeah.
Can I suggest, let's make a video.
Okay.
I'm 100%
Yeah,
serious.
okay.
The inclination of people to watch something, to be presented to,
That's true.
as opposed to having to
Okay.
dig down and read different communities maybe, but however,
Right, because the town meeting, people don't read the material.
some do.
Right, yeah.
It started with-
Well, I mean, so we're brainstorming here, right? You know, what do they tell you? Someone has to hear things 7 times in 7 different ways before it actually, that's what I keep, that's what my mother told me anyhow. Maybe she was just because I wasn't listening to her. Yeah.
Video goes to who?
Well,
Available to the.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody. Yeah.
Here in person for the.
Yes, yes, yeah, this would be after.
Yeah.
In other words, so obviously all this is public material anyway, but maybe we can make it very easy for people to access
Sure.
and just, say, hey, boy, I really want to know what happened, boy, am I gonna go through this? No. But if you talk to me,
It could be a voiceover about 3 or 4 of the key slides in the story of it. It could be that simple at one level. But whatever.
I'm not suggesting we don't do that, but an awful lot of studies have shown that if people see something in print, they believe it much more so than if you just tell them about it. If you say this is gonna cost so many dollars, it kind of goes over their head, but if someone presents, actual hard figures, then they believe it.
yeah, I think you need both.
I'll
Right,
agree with that.
and you know what, if we can get more people to participate by watching it first, and then, your point saying, I'd like to see that more formally.
They can look at it, right? Exactly.
Then give them the other 6 minutes.
Yeah, and look, we're here to accomplish the mission or the charter that we were given, right? In terms of better understanding the needs, putting together a recommendation that relates to the site, that relates to how about transportation, how about operating costs and finances, and how about programmatics, thank you.
Before I volunteer to be a third person, do you envision meetings or doing this online?
I think it starts with a sit down and starting to write the story. I think it might have an advantage of starting with as 2 people and then get it to Jenna and Chris.
I'll let John.
Are you lobbying to join?
I'm not lobbying, but I was going to be the third person.
I'd be happy to let.
you're gonna be criticizing after the fact, shame on you unless you involve yourself in development. So given that, I will yes.
That's not my title.
Could it be kind of a sense of the group that it would be okay for John, and myself to kind of take a pass, send it into Jenna? And then Jenna probably could share it, and then another meeting at some point probably takes place. You folks probably have some feedback on it too. But then to get it to a broader group, it's gonna require us to have a meeting. And the good news, I guess, is that we've got a little bit of time.
Can we
Just need to schedule
generate
it.
feedback off of that after we get it, or do we have to wait till the meeting?
So you could generate feedback and send it to Jenna, but it can't be any form of serial communication.
Right,
We can't be using that as a way to, oh, I can't get it directly, but I can
No,
get it
no,
to
no,
Jenna,
that's
Jenna
fine.
sends it to
No, that's fine,
somebody else.
okay.
I,
Does that work for everybody?
sorry, I just had a comment, someone just commented that have Mark put in these cases, so I don't. Someone on mine just.
Yeah,
typed-
let's finish what
Okay.
we're working on here first,
Okay.
okay? I think we're making really good progress. Let's get. So are we good? Ron, you good? Okay, you're muted, but I heard your.
I'm good.
So do we need to set a meeting to talk about what we come up with, or?
So what I might suggest is, so if you and I kind of work on that structure, John is talking about putting together more pieces. There are other aspects, maybe going through some of the other slides and thinking about it. For example, do we need as much in terms of the history? I did, and I'm happy to share with Jenna, make a bunch of comments on it. Actually, I didn't make comments, I actually wrote some. But to share that and trying to kind of lighten it up quite a bit so that it's great to have the chronology, but I think it's, and, right, here's what we did, and here's what we found. I think that would really help this, and I think that'll fit with the story and make sure that we're able to do that. And I think we also need COA to kind of see where things are here. The ideal scenario is that we are as close to lockstep as we can be with them, or stated a different way, that we kind of put this together and they're looking at it and they're saying, I can support that. I feel good about that. I think that's where we want. I think that's where we have to be. So we want to have, are there other people who want to take pieces?
Like I said, I'm gonna go through and add pieces that I can separately.
Yep.
This one is much easier to read. It's one of our-
Yeah, so all the health improvement stuff is great. Maybe somebody wants to take a look at that and playing with it. Maybe somebody wants to play with the process slides a little bit, or say they're fine, whatever, but kind of take a look at it that way. That'd be great.
The evaluation.
Well, that's a piece of it. I think the whole process piece. And that could include, and then maybe somebody says, hey, the pro con, and areas to further explore. I would be happy to take a look at kind of I'll call it the last slide, which is the next steps slide after the recommendation. And that's more kind of the schedule of things. Actually, I kind of have already done that. John, Nora, what do you guys want to do?
You want to just assign me something. Oh, I'm having a hard time.
Yeah, it's a little dark. Too much for me.
I'm not clear, I've lost the thread here of what we're doing with this.
You two are thinking about the story.
Story, right.
Which is the first 5, 6, 7.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we're still using this as an outline, is that?
I think the story will kind of define a little bit more the outline, but this is kind of, how do we, I almost think that you and I can talk, but I think we kind of start at the end and then work our way to the beginning.
look at this as an outline, it might have
Right, well, and I can see
a
that. in
missing
terms of the
page
story,
or something
and I
that
see
needs to get
you
posted.
mass are gonna be, really bring out some of the areas, and some of the stuff we put in the two newsletters, where we talked about what we found out as far as priority areas. We need to, that'll be part of the story. We'll be drawing from a number of these things, but that's.
We're not talking about creating new content per se, but we're trying to weave it together.
Right, in an area.
But in part, these slides are all, I think you can find details of almost everything we're talking about in these slides.
Yes.
It's just, oh, what's somebody gonna say to this slide, and how are you gonna present this material? And sometimes there's too many words on a slide,
Yeah.
but there's probably not enough thought about what's gonna be said about that slide, so that's a.
Yeah, so I think that's partially structure and organization. That's what that story is. And yeah, much of the material is here, some of the new material is gonna come. Yeah, and I don't think we're reinventing the wheel. I think we're
Right, so what are we asking people when they take a section to actually do with that section without seeing the story?
I would say, so I think some of it can be focused on what I call the so what. So rather than just saying, we did X, it's kind of like, and what do we find from that? What's important about that? The overall story, I hope we all know generally anyway, right? We're going to kind of structure it, but I don't think there's a new story that's coming, right?
Right.
It's, we had, again, I'm going to start at the end and work back actually, but, we're coming to this site recommendation based upon having done all sorts of work with studies that were done, with outside experts, discussions with the community, all these other pieces that point us toward these key activities that require a significant amount of space, that have implications that relate to health and wellness, physical activity, community and socializing. Yeah. I think those are kind of the pieces that go together. I think a lot of it's already here. I think it's how we're going to organize it and make sure that everything kind of points right down to the end of saying, but in pulling this together, here's what we've come to. That's the story.
We find out what part.
Yeah, I think we're in a good process spot, except Nora and John.
Yes, that's cool.
Yeah, are there pieces that you want to grab or comment on?
Yeah. This one I can read.
So, for example, the slides I think Jen and Chris put in related to community health improvement plan, DI assessment, SWEC, those probably are 3 slides that could use some review.
I have to say, like you often find, if we didn't have this, we wouldn't have been able to move forward actually, because
This is great.
Because until you see something, you say, oh, well, it doesn't have this
Yeah.
or.
Yeah, would have been terrific.
The philosophy of I don't mind taking the first step, no matter how bad it is, because if it simply generates people's juices to say, hey, I think more about it, then you've done more than you've accomplished your goal.
Yes, no,
So
that's
absolutely, this is really, we need to start with something to say, what's missing? What are we looking for? I know before we talk about just real quick, so we do need to think about a next meeting.
Yes.
I'd like to, the board's meeting the 13th?
18th.
PBC?
PBC is the
Oh,
13th.
BBC.
Yes.
So I know we're not gonna necessarily have a full answer from them, but that might be interesting to meet after that.
Well, and then they're gonna meet the 10th, so it's gonna be.
That's in June.
Yes.
But I think we should, can I make a suggestion? 2 weeks, so we need to do more, there's a fair amount of work that needs to be done on this even beforehand.
Yes.
So can we meet on either the 22nd or the 29th? Just to kind of do a circle back on the things that we've just been asked to do tonight and get this to the next step.
Can't do the 22nd. Could certainly do the 29th. Or actually, I could do earlier on the 22nd if we could meet earlier in the day. Just I have to be kind of hard stop at 7.
What does the group think?
Tomorrow.
22nd or the
22nd.
29th?
Being able to get the story. We're gonna.
So you and I should just talk offline and set up a.
Right, but I mean, are we gonna be, you think that'll give us?
Why don't we
Yeah, do people expect to have a story by then? That's.
I think we should probably give it 3 weeks, so that'd be the 29th. And then I think the answer is we should have a draft of, an updated draft of this that we can all review.
Just so you know, I think COA is meeting most Mondays right now.
And Tuesdays, and
As special meeting, so our board meeting's the 13th, and then I think the 10th, like you said. But I think they're trying to meet every Monday evening.
Will that work?
Yes.
How about you, Ron? 29th? You're muted.
29th works for me.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So now, yes, Mark Delaney. Thank you for your patience.
Yep, no, I understand that. Let me come on video. I've got good news. The Bruins are up 1-0. That's the good news. So I have a suggestion. I don't know if anybody's done this, but this is based on our experience here with the water tank, another big public construction project. Has everyone had the opportunity to visit and walk the site at Oakland Road, as I did today, and drive by the homes impacted by the project on Beacon Street, Chestnut, Ridge Road, and Hillside? And the reason I say this is, this is a very complicated project. You can lose sight of common sense. And I know this and learned this from the fact that a former town manager tried for 3 years to put a 200-foot cell tower in the middle of our neighborhood. And it wasn't until after he got the select board to approve it, right? We missed that we invited, Mark Doxer was one of them, and appreciated his support, each select board member up to the site to actually see it. And, that there's no better perspective on a project like that when it impacts where you live than actually seeing it. The select board subsequently, even though they had approved it, reversed their vote and shot it down. So if you folks have not visited the site, as I did today, what I was struck by today, and I've been there many times in the past because I used to walk my dogs through there, is there's got to be a 10 to 15 foot drop from where the ledge is that they have to deal with to the bottom of the site. So I don't know if their play is to raise the lower end, or they got to take 10 feet of, I don't know if it's all ledge, but so again, here's just a suggestion. Don't lose sight of the common sense. Put yourself in the shoes of the people that live and abut this site. The consultant identified 2 houses. I counted 8 to 10 today that abut this site that'll be directly impacted by this project. So I would ask you to do that. And if you've done that, great. If you haven't done it, you absolutely should. And you should also consider, as Mark did with other select board members, is let the residents know you're doing that so they can meet you there and you can see. You folks should put yourself in the same shoes as if that's your house that this project is being built beside. So, thank you for listening to my comment. That's my recommendation, and if you haven't done it, I hope you'll do that. That's it. Everyone
Thank you,
can
Mark.
go and watch the Bruins now. And my arm is real tired from holding my hand up all this time. Anyways,
Nobody else?
you should really consider that. It's eye-opening, right? It really is eye-opening when you see, they actually stand there in this stand there on the site, in the middle, there's a nice trail there, you walk right in. You can look down, you'll see this whole thing, you'll have, I think, further questions for your consultant on it. So thank you. And with that, I'm gonna leave you because I'm gonna go watch the Bruins. So I hope you folks have a good night.
Thanks,
Thank
Mark.
you.
Thank you.
I've been by it so many times, but I didn't really stop to pay attention for recently. The Oakland Road thing, but I will walk it.
I think, to his point, you need to walk all three again.
Yeah.
So I've walked, I'll call it the outside of all three.
Yeah.
You take a look on the inside a little bit more.
I know the COA has brought up, they've mentioned a couple of times about maybe we could take one of the buses or vans here
Yes.
and drive to each site. I know that's been brought up. I don't know where it has gotten to.
Before we leave, I just want a clear understanding of what I'm supposed to do with one of these pages.
What would you like to do with it?
What do you want,
are you asking me for my suggestion, John?
I sort of like, in order to pick the page, you want me to pick one page here?
Section.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've got a different thing. Is this a section or is this a section?
I think this is low enough.
First page.
Yeah, so that one's just more.
Yeah, that's why I like it.
So it depends on how much challenge you want. If you want less challenge, go to the first page.
The timeline.
Look what the one that's very good.
Yeah, the title page.
John, are there pieces there we can look at? You say, no. I see this a little differently. I see a good way to think about this and talk
Okay.
about this.
So, what hasn't been taken?
So,
The recommendations.
okay, John's got that one. So, Nora, did you?
I said,
Which is what?
for, why don't you do
Somebody doing the pros and cons.
5 to
Because I noticed
Yeah.
on Pleasant Street, the one thing that jumped out at me as a pro for the Pleasant Street site is that it could be rented out for solar. I'm saying, well, no, that's.
The other side of that.
Right, that should go on the other two, maybe. Not on the Pleasant Street.
I was gonna look at the site selection process.
Which I think would be include the pros and cons, right?
And then goes through the.
Okay.
Yeah. And Nora, you were gonna look at, sorry, the kind of the alignment of RECAL, the slide that says alignment of RECAL priorities with community health improvement plan, CHIP.
Yeah,
Alignment of RECAL priorities with DEI assessment.
yeah, and I'm gonna give sweat to John.
Great. And John, you can get the SWEC presentation, the slide presentation, or I can just email it to you, because I have it from last night. It's in the select board packet from last night.
Yeah, I think I've still got it. Why don't you give me a email to him anyway, just in case I was, but.
Okay.
This is the one you found.
And along the lines of the select presentation, they're gonna meet with the recreation committee next Monday. And recreation's gonna have.
So,
have something to say
interesting
about
that you were bringing that up, because Recreation had put a letter in, if you remember, at the end, kind of towards the end of our process last time.
Yeah.
Do we want to officially solicit something from them at this point? Is that what you're recommending? I mean, I don't know, is that something we should do again at this point, or? I know there's a lot of conversations about, soliciting input from all these different committees and groups, and I'm not necessarily sure well, I don't know.
I mean, I think there are two things. One is certainly awareness
Yeah.
that they're kind of in the loop. The other is whether or not they're going to formally meet, formally take a vote, formally do each of the pieces. And we don't. There isn't to some extent, it may be that that's more what the drawings are going to flush out in terms of what's going to happen. And on the SWAC side, I think the notion is that if Simon's Way is the preferred location, whatever facility we're talking about isn't going to take up all of the land, not even close, which is what SWAC showed in kind of the basic drawings. So the fact that they are aware of what's going on, I think, is awesome. If they have specific thoughts on site, I guess that would be fine. I think we're not quite to the next level, which is, hey, once we're talking about this is the site, we're talking about doing things, then I think we really would want to get them talking about it in their meetings too, and realizing that that's a 6-week process probably, or whatever, 4-week process.
I mean, one concept of Simon's Way is a big site. Would land will probably go to conservation and could be developed for the Center for Active Living, the baseball field, the soccer field. There's in the road to rifle range, and SWAC did mention that they would have to create do a road improvement. So I think, depending on what you do with Simon's Way, there's things that you would do to improve the entire site. And, the batting cage, things.
Yeah, and that's a whole
It's a whole other
process.
thing.
It's a plan in and of itself in terms of where that ends up. Okay. Are we?
So there's one hand up.
Oh.
No, that's the,
No.
That was the
cursor.
That was the
That's the cursor.
Second. Okay, and all in favor?
You have to do a roll call.
Yes, I'm doing it. Yeah. Ron Assini,
Yes.
John Sasso,
Yes.
Mark Doxson.
Yes.
Michael Cole.
Yes.
Lauren Buckle.
Yes.
John Parsons.
Yes.
John O'Neill. So 7-0 in favor of adjournment.
I found that I do have it.
Oh, you do? Okay, I was just gonna send it to you.
All right.
I don't seem to have your email.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Good job making
Thank you.
progress.
Is there
Thanks.
no.
Oh.
That was